I'm just gonna go ahead and start recording at work. It seems like I never get anything done at home. So this is pretty much my lunch break, and so I'm gonna go ahead and start doing this tutorial series right here. So what we're gonna do in lesson 19 is we're gonna be looking at sword projectiles. So I just got the sword, and I have full health, and so I should be able to shoot a projectile sword, just like that. Okay, and then when it hits, when it hits the edge of the screen, it should actually do an animation as well. But what we want, what we want to start off with is just when it hits the enemy, it does that kind of breakup animation. So let's go ahead and check that out. Just like that, okay? And so that's exactly what we're looking to do during this video. All right. It seems like there's a collision detection issue where it's not detecting immediately when it enters the enemy. And we'll iron that out here in a little bit. But for right now, we're looking at adding this projectile system to the already happening sword animation. So there's actually a sword being the sword is actually extending, and then at the height of extension, it just shoots out the sword from there. So if there were an enemy in front of me, the extended sword that is staying at your arm hits the enemy first. So it does collision detection there first, and then it shoots the projectile. So that enemy would die, and then potentially another enemy behind it would get hit by the projectile. And so that's what we're going to be looking at today. And so I'm really excited to get going back on this series, and I hope you are too. So let's go ahead and look at the code. And so here is our starter code right here. And so where we left off is so let's see here. So there's a few things that we need to add, and the first thing is going to be under our game objects. So this is an array, and so we might as well add our next array here. And so this array is going to be our projectiles array. So I'm just going to go ahead and say let projectiles equal that. And now projectiles are going to be game objects, but we're going to be handling them in their own array. So we can do our own collision detection right then. And so I'm not sure if this is the best way of doing it. It's just when I was programming it, this is how I did it. And so I would like to talk about that. There are lots of ways I could refactor this code. And if you look up here, we already have all these global variables, and probably not the best way of going about things. But it's our way of going about things for right now. Once we get towards the end of the series, if we want to refactor and show how we might be able to do some things differently or more succinct, we could certainly go about that route. But for right now, we are doing just fine, okay? And this is how we are going to continue, okay? So what we want to do is we also have another variable that we'll need, and that's going to be if we can actually shoot the sword. So let can shoot sword, and this is actually going to start off as true, okay? Now, what I've noticed through watching the videos and then watching GitHub and so forth is that most people are not, well, I won't say most, I would say 30 to 40% of people are actually following through the videos, which means that they're actually going through and coding along. And that's the only way you're really going to get anything out of this. If you're just following through this because of you're interested in the project, well, that's great too. But most people that are just following just to check up on the progress, look at the very beginning of the video and then maybe the very end to see where we are headed next. And it's really low. It shows low viewer engagement. And so hopefully you can start the series over if you're not already following along and coding along, because if you are a beginner or maybe even intermediate programmer and you're just looking about how to start going about programming video games, I mean, this is an excellent series. I mean, recreating something from the ground up that already exists is it's a really great way of working on your logic skills and your programming skills. Okay, so hopefully you're following along. But anyway, so we need this variable so that because we don't want them to shoot too fast, and this way we can limit their rate of their rate of speed for shooting. Okay, and so what we want to do next is probably go to the key down handler and look at key code 32 so that when they attack, we are saying, hey, that they can actually attack again, and so, or can shoot again. So we're going to say can shoot sword is equal to true here. So they've hit the button and they can certainly hit that sword. And so what we want to do now is we want to actually go down into drawing link, and if he's attacking, right now we have it so that if he's attacking, and let's see here, we don't want that. So if he's attacking and he has a sword, and so if it's the current animation, we draw him, his first animation in the attack sequence. And then if it's the second animation, where current animation is equal to 1, then this is where the sword is fully extended. And so this is where the attack is happening because we're actually checking to see if we're colliding with other objects. And then we should also be, so after that collision, we need to go ahead and add a game object in. And so this game object, or our projectile, is then going to be added to the draw projectiles, and it's going to track its progress across the screen, and then eventually check to see game object collisions at some later point. Okay, and so what happened? How do we know that a sword can actually be a projectile? Well, if the current link hearts is equal to link hearts, so that means that they have full life, and we can shoot the sword. So basically, it's this if statement. So if current link hearts, I will get it eventually, current link hearts is equal to link hearts, and can shoot sword. And I'll bring this down to the bottom so that we can. Okay. Okay, so this is, we have the ability to shoot a projectile, and so now we're just going to code it out. And so, like I said, these projectiles that are going to be in this new array are just going to be game objects. And so we're just going to say we're just going to say let projectile equal a new game object, And then we need to know its direction. So we're going to say proj.direction. And this is going to be equal to our last button pressed. Whatever button you press last is going to be passed on to this, so it knows which direction to fly. And so we already know kind of which direction to fly because we're in this block of code that says, well, the last button pressed was down. Okay, so we could easily just replace this with down right here, but so what we want to do now is the direction that we're actually facing determines where this projectile should be placed. Okay, and so it's slightly different for each direction, and that's why we can't just add this in one single block of code. We need to break it up into the last button pressed as we are doing. And so here the x, so we're going to say projectile x is equal to our link x. And I just worked out these numbers. They're actually pretty quick, and so I think they look pretty good. Although for collision detection, we need to actually go back and look at some things because even though they're colliding with enemies, it's not perfect collision. It does collide with them, but the sword may go into the enemy a few pixels and then collide. So we definitely need to go back and look at that at some point. But for right now, it does work. Okay, and then we're going to say link y plus 8. And so where am I getting these? Okay, so if we're facing down, this is where the projectile's being placed. So if we're facing down, you can imagine Link right here. His sword is going to be somewhere down here, and that is going to be like, you know, past his current position. All right, and so that's where we're getting these numbers. And then the speed. So this y speed is how fast it is moving, and so we want it to move in the y direction at a positive 2 speed, and so that means it's going to be going down since the y increases as it goes down, and the x increases as it goes right. So we need this to be a positive 2 here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to give it a new property that we don't have yet. And so we're just going to say projectile is sword projectile, and we're going to set that equal to true. And we're going to play a new sound. So when you hit the button and you have full health, 2 sounds are played in the original Zelda. The actual slash for the sword, and then the sword shoot, okay? And so here we're just going to play that sound. The location is in our sounds folder, and it's titled LOZ sword shoot dot wave. Okay. And then we're just going to push this to our projectiles array. Then we're going to say projectiles dot push, and then we're just going to push this object, which is our proj. And then we're just going to say can shoot sword is equal to false. Now, so this is pretty important. If you don't do this, it might be possible that you could just hold down the space bar and just shoot a complete line where it would shoot, 60 in a second. Every time it hits that instruction, it's going to hit, a new projectile is going to come out. So we don't want that. In fact, as it is, it already shoots really fast. So we need to slow down the attack timer so that they can't immediately attack. Okay, so at this point we have this huge block of code right here, And pretty much this is going to stay the same except for the X and Y and the Y speed or X speed. For each one of these buttons, the last button press is equal to up, left, and right. And so coming down to the next thing, what we're going to do is we're going to come down here and we are going to paste it in. Okay, so I copied it from the down one, the if statement from the down. I'm going to paste it into the up, and we're just going to change a few things. So, so if it is up, we're going to do link X +1, and then link Y -6, and the Y speed is going to be a negative. Okay, so it's going to go in the up direction. And so, and for left, it's going to be a lot of the same. In fact, if we go down, for left, we're going to say left X, or I'm sorry, projectile X is going to be -12 +4, and then this is going to be, so if we're going left, the X speed is going to go in the negative direction. So this is going to be X, and this is going to be -2. Just going to copy this one so we don't have to change that again. And then for right, the X speed is going to be positive again. And then here we can just say link X, and then here we can just say +3. Okay. And then everything else looks fine for this part. And so the next thing we need to do is, let's see here. So there was some housekeeping that I needed to do in add game objects. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at that. Because as it stands in our starter code, if we go from a below map to an upper map or to a right map, it actually pushes or from a right, like a right map to a left map, it pushes us like 16 pixels to the left or to the up direction. And so it looks really off-putting. I mean, it looks like, man, how did I get out here if I just left, if I just went up, I should be much closer to the bottom of the screen instead of like a whole game object away. Or the height of link away. So that we definitely need to fix some things there. And so I thought I would go ahead and do that in this video as well. And so that's pretty easy. It's going to be, where is it going to be? It's going to be somewhere down here. So in add map game objects, this is what automatically adds all of our exits and entrances to each map. So as we go to a new map, it automatically lines all the entrances and exits to the next map surrounding us. Okay, and so and it gives us the new link X and the new link Y, and so we definitely need to make a few changes here. Okay, so the first change is this new link Y. So this means that we are going up, okay, or I'm sorry, we are going down. We're in an upper map and we're going to a lower map. And right now, it is set to 81, okay, which puts you somewhere like down here when we're talking about, so like if we were to look at this, in fact, I'll pull it up again. So it puts us like much further down here. It puts us like right here when we come from this direction to this direction. And so you start out the map like way down here. Now that could be really problematic in some maps because you're actually put into a bush and you can't move or something like that. And so that's a major issue, and that's what we're fixing right here. And so to fix that, we are going to change this 81 and we're going to make it 65. Okay? And that's as close as you can get without being moved back into the previous map. Another thing that we probably want to change is if j is equal to 0, that means that we are going from a right map to a left map in the left direction. And this 223 puts us like way far into the map, and so we want to change this to something like 239. Okay, and so those are just some minor changes that I was looking at, and I wanted to kind of fix because it really looked off. Okay, and then so the real thing that we're going to do right here is we have these projectiles and they are in their own array. And so what I would like to do is create a new function, and we're just going to call this draw projectiles. Okay, so go ahead and say function draw projectiles. And so we're just going to loop through our projectiles. And so we're just going to start out with a normal for loop. Okay. And so here we're just going to say for let I is equal to 0 while I is less than projectiles dot length I plus plus. And then there are going to be other projectiles that we draw here, okay? For instance, another projectile I can think of that is added already is the Link's arrows. There's also the boomerang. And so, and the boomerang has like special code because it actually can loop back around to you. Even if you're walking away, so that's that's something that's going to be coming up in a future video, is how to do the boomerang and how to actually let it catch objects and bring those back to you and stuff like that. So that's pretty exciting. But so there's some other projectiles that we're worried about, and so what we want to do is check to see what kind of projectile it is. And so here we're going to say if projectiles at I dot is sword projectile. Okay, so it is a sword projectile, all right, if we're in this if statement. One thing that we haven't done yet is change the let's see here. So inside of our maps file, if you go ahead and open up your maps file right quick, this is probably going to be done for you because I don't have like a starter maps file and an ending maps file. But if you look inside of this, we have a new property of game objects, okay? And so this game object can now be a sword projectile, and we start that out as false. Now, if you look at this game object, it is actually growing quite large, and it has lots of these properties that most objects are not going to be have, but they're necessary. Okay. Now, I was thinking of ways of making this a lot more compact. In fact, if we create a new object, we have to create basically every new object has to have these properties, whether they are an old woman or not. Okay, so that's a lot of overhead for each game object. But for right now, this is the best model we have. Now, if we were to create like a retail game, and we had some space limitations such as the NES did way back then, what we might want to do is just have like just like an array, or not array, but just, or maybe even array of just some bit number, okay? And then that way we can just check individual bits down this huge number, this huge binary number, and each one of those bits would represent some property or properties within this game object, and then that way that could create that could make this game object much much more compact. The only trade-off there is that you're kind of this is actually it's readable. Okay, I can say, well, is it attacking? Well, is it true or false? All right. With that, I would have to say, well, which bit is it that's representing is attacking, and is it a 0 or a 1? Okay, and so we would be trading off readability for that smaller size. And for a beginning level type of tutorial, we certainly don't want to trade off any readability. Okay, so this is getting large, and it's going to get larger. That's all I'm going to say. I already have the final, and it is quite large. But because we never have too many game objects on the screen at any one time, it doesn't really take any kind of hit to performance, and we wipe out the or we store the game objects. But even if we stored every game object for every map on the screen, it's still not going to be a gigantic file. Okay, so it's not really that big of a deal. Ooh, I have to get this done in 59 minutes, although I think we're pretty close to being done anyways. Okay, so we added this file, or this property, and so that's what we're checking right here. And so what we want to do right now is we want to go through and animate this thing as it's flying through the air. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is, just like we do with the game objects, when drawing game objects, we're just going to say projectiles at i.counter. And so this counter is going to kind of guide our animations. And then here we're going to say if projectiles at i.counter is greater than 2, well, we want to increase our frame and then we want to set our counter back to 0. And so I'm just going to copy this. Okay, and here what we want to do is we want to say if is greater than 1, because there are only 2 frames to our sword animation. I think in the retail there may be 4, but in our sword animation there's only 2, and so it can have either a 0 or a 1, and if it's greater than 1, the frame, we don't have anything to draw. So what we want to do is set it back to 0. So we're just going to say projectiles okay, perfect. Okay, so this little part is finished, and what we want to do now is we want to say, well, if the projectile is going up, we want to draw something. Okay. In fact, I think a lot of this code can actually be factored down quite a bit. Oh, no. It can't, because each sword has a different animation space. And I guess we could refactor it to make it smaller, but it's not really all that big of a deal. Okay? And so what we want to do here is we want to say if, no, not here. down here. Okay, so this is just controlling the animation. And here we're going to say, well, if the projectile direction, projectiles at I dot direction is equal to, and a lot of this is going to be copy and paste after this first one. Okay, so if it's equal to up, what do we want to do? Well, we want to say projectiles at I dot Y plus equals, you know what, we did have a Y and an X speed, but we're just going to use this hard-coded value. I guess I could just do Y speed. So here we'll just do okay, so that works. And then what we want to do here is we want to say, well, if the frame is equal to whatever so if it's equal to 0, we have to draw some sort, okay? And now, the way I had it before to control the speed of the projectile, I was doing partial increments, so not incrementing full integer values, but doing like double values. And so I was having to do a math.floor. I think that might still be necessary, especially if we want to change something later, because JavaScript doesn't know how to draw an image at an x 23.1 and a y of 30.6. Okay, and so when it has to do that, then you get a blurry image for some reason. And so you really want to floor those values and round them down so that you don't get that blurry image. And so that's what I'm talking about there. And so here we're going to pull from the link 1. We're going to be Ctx Draw Image. We're going to be pulling from the sprite sheet called link 1. And we're going to be drawing the sprite from 64 to 195. It has a width of 8, a height of 16. And this is going to be that math.floor value. And this is going to be projectiles at I.X. I'll just copy this. Projectiles at I.Y. And then what we want to do is it has the same, I can just go ahead and add it to this one. It has the same width and height that the original artwork had. Okay, and so if we wanted to look at this, it's going to be inside of our, so let's see here if we can find the link. So I think this is link 2. Let me go ahead and open up link 1. Okay, so this is link 1. And so these are where these values are coming from. So we're currently on the up direction. And so that is going to be right here. And so that's 64 and 195. So that's where we're getting those. And if we look at it, it is indeed 64, 195. So you know what, you know, if you wanted to change things, make it more animation sequences, you know how to do that. And so we're just going to copy this. because now we want to do the down direction and so forth. We actually need to do the second frame. So I'm just going to copy this. And we could just do an else if since they can't be the same. So this is the if frame is equal to 0. This is the frame is equal to 1. And so if the frame is equal to 1, it's going to be 64 and not 195. It's going to be 255. Okay. And so that's that. All right. And so what we want to do now is we're going to copy this, and now we're going to do the down direction. And so we're just going to change the direction down, or the direction to down. And so here, what we're going to do is this stays the same, so that looks good, but the images are different. Okay, so so this one is going to be at 4, and this one is going to be at 4 as well. So, and then, so this looks good. So I'm going to copy this again, and if we're going left, then some other things are going to happen. So let's go ahead and paste this in. Go ahead and change the direction. Now, if we're going left and right, then the X speed is what's going to be affected here. And so we probably want to change that. And then, so here we need to change this. So this is going to be 30, 199.
Well, it's 11:30. We've been here about an hour. Y'all ready to close this meeting up?
What we want to do now, so this is 199, 816. This is going to be 30, 259. 816. And so here, all that looks good. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to say if it is right. So this is left. This one's going to be right. And so this one is going to be 90. So instead of 30 here, we're going to have 90. 90. Oh, one big thing. So if we're in the left and right direction, the width actually becomes 16 and the height becomes 8. So we definitely need to make that change. Okay, so all the 8s become 16 right here. And these become 8. In fact, I'm just going to copy this right here and paste it over these. Okay, and so that looks pretty good. What we want to do now is, so this was drawing the projectile. And what we want to do now is we want to actually check if our projectile is colliding with anything. Okay, so here we're just going to go through a for loop and go through all of our game objects. Okay, so no big deal. This is going to be a for loop, so we're going to say for let j equals 0. Now it's important that we're doing j because we're already on the I within projectiles, and so j is going to be our variable for the game objects that we're going to be looping through. Okay, so let j equal to 0 while j is less than game objects.length. J++. And then here we're just going to see if it is colliding. So how do we know if it's colliding? Well, if projectiles at I dot x is less than or equal to game objects at j dot x plus game objects at j dot width. Okay, and so this is going to kind of go off the screen, and then here we're just going to say and, okay, and so here we're going to say projectiles at I dot x plus projectiles at I dot width is greater than or equal to game objects at j dot x. Okay, and so I'm just going to copy this again and just change the x's to y's and get rid of that. Okay, and so this second line should be the y, and this should say height. This should say y, height, and y. Okay? Okay, so this if statement, if we're inside here, is true. And so if it is true, what do we want to do? Well, we want to check to see if it's an enemy, because we could be colliding with a wide variety of things, such as portals or whatever. And so we don't want to do anything if it's a portal. So we just want to say, well, if game objects at j dot is enemy, we want to decrement its life by 1, I guess. Okay, and then we want to say, well, it needs to bounce because we want it to get away from our current position. So, and this is at J right here. I missed that. And so here we're going to say game objects dot needs bounce is equal to true. And then we're going to get our bounce location. So where should we be bouncing to? We're going to say get bounce location. And then inside here, we're going to pass the game object that it is. We're going to say false. And then we're going to pass in the direction that we projectiles at I dot direction. Okay, perfect. And then what we want to do here is we're going to create a new game object because we like that animation that plays at the end. Okay, so that's actually going to make this video a little bit longer, but I do want to get that animation in. So here we're just going to say GO is equal to new game object. And then here we're going to say GO dot is animation. And I may or may not have that property already set up, which is weird. But anyways, I'm going to say is animation is equal to true. And so I just want to check that. And I don't, so we're going to need that as well. So you're just going to say this dot is animation is equal to false. Okay, And so here we're going to say is animation is equal to true. We're going to say go.counter is equal to -1. Go.animation type is equal to 0. Okay, so this is another property that we don't have. And so I'm just going to say this dot animation type. And we're going to set that equal to a -1, just because. Okay, since this one is starting out at 0. And then so where do we want this to occur? So we need our x and a y. So we're going to say go.x is equal to our projectiles at I.x. And so I'm just going to copy this because the y is going to be very similar. Go.y is equal to projectiles at I.y. And we're going to just push this to game objects. Okay, we don't need to do any special processing with this, no special collision detection, so it can just be animated as the game objects are being drawn. So push, and we're just going to push this game object. And then here, what we want to do is we want to say, well, the game object that we are currently looking at is an enemy. We've subtracted 1 from its health. Now, if we subtracted 1 from its health, well, we need to check to see if it's 0. So we need to say game objects at j.health is equal to 0. Then we want to play our sound. And this is going to be in our folder called sounds, and it is going to be LOZ. Okay, so we play the sound, and then we want to splice where we currently are. Okay, so we're just going to say game objects dot splice, and we're going to say j to 1. Okay, and then here we're just going to say else. So here we played the die sound, but you know, if we didn't kill it, we want to play just enemy hit. Okay. All right, and then if either of these happen, so if we hit it, no matter what, we're just going to get rid of our projectile that we currently have. So projectiles dot splice, and then we're going to say I to 1. And then we're just going to break out of this. Okay. Okay, so that looks great. And so one thing that we need to look at is this this animation. Okay, is animation. So we push this to game objects, and now we need to take care of this. Okay, so that's certainly going to be in game objects, and so I'm just going to go ahead and see exactly where we should be putting this. Okay, so let's go up to our draw game objects. So that's pretty much it for, I say that's pretty much it. That was a lot of code. So here we're going to go up to draw game objects. Okay, and pretty much this can be the last one that we put here, or the first one, it doesn't matter. So that can go like right here. Okay, so we're just going to say if game objects at I dot is animation, and so if this is an animation, then what we want to do is we want to go ahead and do our counter just like always when we're animating. So we're just going to go over here and say game objects at I.counter. And then we're going to say if counter is equal to 1 or greater than or equal to 1, we're going to increase the frame and set the counter back to 0. So this is just, so we're going to say if we're going to say okay, so this is just to play around, so you can actually play around with the speed of the animation. So if you wanted to see if it looks nicer when you increase it by 1, you can. And so what we want to do now is remember that there is a animation, there are multiple animations. So we have animation type, and so here we're just going to check to see the animation type. We're going to say if so here we're just going to say if game objects at I.animation type is equal to 0. So now we're going to check the frame, and I kind of want the sword pieces. You know, they split off into 4 fragments. I kind of want them to hang around for a little bit, and so I do it by every 2 frames. And so how I do that is I just go ahead and say, well, if game objects at I so if the frame is equal to 0 or the frame is equal to 1, okay? So that's 2 frames that is going to be on this single animation, okay? And so what do we want to draw? Well, we want to draw the piece that is flying off this, okay? So I'm going to scroll over, and I'm doing this at work, so I'm on like a really cheap laptop. And so the screen resolution sucks, and so I have to kind of scroll over so that everything is going to be on the screen. So here, what we want to do is we want to do the Ctx Draw Image. And so here, we want to draw it from link 1. It's going to start at 119, 282. And if we wanted to look at it real quick, we could. Basically, it's going to be these pieces right here, okay? So this is 119, and then this is going to be 282. So we're talking about this piece right here. So this piece flies off in this direction, this piece flies off in this direction, this piece goes down to the left, and this one goes down to the right. Okay, and so that is located at 119, 282, and it has a width and a height of 8. Okay, and so now what we want to do is we want to say game objects at I.x minus 8. So we're positioning it away from our sword, because if they all start in the same direction or at the same spot, you know, it's going to look really weird for it coming out. It has to like start around the sword, okay? And so that's what we're doing right there. And then here, we're actually going to use the frame as its kind of movement, okay? So we're going to say minus game objects, minus game objects at I dot frame. Okay, and so that's the first, and I'm going to copy this. And this is going to be the Y. And so the X and Y are both going in the negative direction, okay? And the Y, and it's going to be drawn with a length and width of 8, okay? And so this is only one of those little objects, and for each frame we should have 4 objects because there are going to be 4 pieces of sword. So I'm just going to copy this, and it's going to be a couple of quick and easy pastes. And so here we are going to say these numbers do change over here. So, but I'm going to go ahead and paste it in a few times. Oops. Okay, so these numbers do change right here. So this is going to be 128. 282 stays the same. And if we're thinking about this, this one is going to move. This is one is going to go down. I'm sorry, it's going to go right and down. Okay, so this is what this one is doing. So this is going to be a plus and a plus. And then we have 119, 293. And then this one is going to go in the down direction, but in the left direction. And then finally, we have this one down here that is at 128, 293. And this is going to go in both the positive X and positive Y direction. So here we're just going to add it to both. Okay, so here's the tedious part. We want to do this for multiple frames. Okay, so this is for frame 0 and 1. And we're going to alternate between drawing this animation and I believe drawing this animation. Okay, so they get alternated so it looks like it's flashing. Okay, or it might be this animation. I'm not quite sure. Now it could be all 4. I just chose 2 of them, but it could be all 4 that I didn't slow it down the gameplay footage to see if it was all 4, but I think 2 does the job. Okay, so here we're going to look at frames 2 and 3. Okay, and so if they're frames 2 and 3, we definitely want to change this over here. We want to say 2, and then this is going to be 3. And so we're on the next set, and so this is going to be, we just changed that to a 4. This is going to go to a 5. This is going to go to a 4. This is going to go to a 5. And everything else stays exactly the same. Now, for 4 and 5, we're just going to repeat these up here. Okay, so this is going to be for 4 and 5, and I'm just going to go copy this. And I'm just going to place this at 4 and 5. Now, for 6 and 7, guess what? It's going to be these dudes right here. And I guess these could be else ifs. So this is going to be 6 and 7. And so that's pretty much that right there. Now, if it's not 6 and 7, okay, then we want an else down here. And I'm going to go and change those to else ifs. So if it's past 7, so if it's gotten to the 9th, so 0 through 7 would be the first 8 frames of animation. And so if it's got to the 9th frame of animation, we just want to go ahead and get rid of it. Okay, so it has run its animation sequence, and we're going to go ahead and splice it from our array. And then that's it. Okay, so these need to be else ifs. So we have an if, and then an else if, else if, else if, and then an else. Okay, so it looks like we are pretty much there. Okay, so the only thing that we really have to do is do this draw projectiles, and everything else comes from there. And so here, I'm just going to, after, I don't quite know if it really even matters here. So after draw game objects, I'm just going to even say draw projectiles. Okay, fingers crossed. Okay, so we're just going to run this and hope that it does. Well, make sure I've saved over here. Okay. I got hit before I went in, so I can't even test it. Okay. Okay, so that looks good. Now we need to test the actual animation. Perfect. Let's see if there are any errors. This would generally not run if there were errors. But yeah, you see there's a lot of console.logs that I need to get rid of in here. But otherwise, I would say that it's quite a success. Okay. Uh-oh. Okay, so some steps going forward. There are so many that we can't even like fill out in the rest of this video, but there are so many things that we need to work on. The first thing is there's no way to recover hearts because our treasure profile is kind of busted. We only have rupees falling from enemies, and so there's a pretty interesting way that they do loot inside of Zelda. There's like a treasure, a table for treasure, and it's based on the type of enemy that you're fighting. And so we're going to implement that table faithfully, and so that the kill counter, so if you're on kill number 1, it's going to affect the loot that drops versus kill number 9, okay? So we're definitely going to look at that. A few other things is we have about 40 different types of enemies, and currently we only have 2 in game. So we have lots of different enemy types, and some of them have unique movements and unique paths that they follow. And so, we could easily fill in 10 or 15 videos on just different enemy types and how to get those different animations and logic working. We need to add bombs so that we can determine secret locations, and the same thing for candles. So there's a ton of stuff that we need to do. We need to get all the inventory items so that they work. We need to be able to select inventory items because right now we can't even select inventory items in this version of the game. So there's a ton that we need to do, and I don't even know what next video is going to be. The next video is going to be. I haven't even made it yet, but it's going to be one of those things. Okay, so stay tuned, and it should be up and running probably tomorrow, maybe a little bit later since I have a job interview that I need to start prepping for. But that's it. So I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. Have a very good day.